Hey guys and gals, I'm Sean at Shock Surplus, and today we are going to get into a 4Runner's buyer's guide of all of these high performance shock absorbers. We've got a 5th gen 4Runner. A lot of these options are going to apply for all 2003 and up 4Runner applications. We've got basically the best of the best here. There might be some options here and there that are missing, but amongst everything that we sell and out there on the market, these are the most popular coilover requests that we have. So we're just going to start left to right. We've got the Fox 2.0 coilovers. These things are the tried and true Fox breed of aluminum body shocks and a 2-inch package, leveling height, 2 inches of leveling right out of the box. The Eibach 2.0s, these are brand new in the past 12 to 16 months for a lot of the Toyota applications, including the 4Runner. These are steel body, but they're providing a little bit more lift out of the box than the Fox 2.0. We'll get into why shortly. The Bilstein 6112s are also fairly new in terms of lifespan of most of these shocks, but these are a 2.5-inch body with a 60 millimeter piston. So more leveling height as well, and we'll get into why later on. The Icon 2.5 coilovers, these are extended travel. They're offered in normal travel. This particular setup has their CDCV adjustment settings, which is basically 10 settings from very soft compression to very firm compression. We'll dive into the specifics on how settings, compression settings affect your ride and who it's actually good for. These King 2.5s are the famous blue. Nothing rides like a King, and we'll get into why here shortly. But these are the cream of the crop, one of the most requested products we have on this table with a currently 20-week lead time due to COVID. Thanks so much. Fox 2.5, they're leading the way with a dual adjustment setting. So low speed, high speed settings on these DSC specific shocks. The 2.5s come in non-reservoir, with reservoir, and with DSC reservoir. So we'll explain some of those differences in a minute. These brand new Bilstein 8112s are Bilstein's foray into high performance off-road. While not as flashy as some of these other models, there is a lot of high-tech technology happening inside this main shock body that we'd love to get into. The Old Man Emu BP51s over here, these are one of the most feature-rich coilovers on this table. We'll get into why on how the compression and the rebound settings make a difference with the internal bypass. Before we get started, this is a long video. We're going to timestamp the bottom so you can cut straight to the chase on whatever option that you are thinking of, but we're going to get into what all the detailed features of each coilover and who they may be good for. So on the Fox 2.0 coilovers, these have an aluminum body. These things are set at 2 inches of lift out of the box, which means that this coil spring collar is preloading the coil spring to provide 2 inches of lift over factory. You can back off this coil spring collar to put it back down at factory height, and by doing so, you may get a little bit of a softer ride. The aluminum body means these things are pretty lightweight versus the competition steel body, but that also means that you can't make the adjustments usually on the truck with coil spring tension on the collar, because trying to move this collar is going to damage these threads. This is a serviceable shock. Tried and true. These things ran great. Ran these on my own Tacoma. Definitely highly recommended for the price point. These things usually start about $900, $950 for the pair, which brings us to the Eibach 2.0s, which are brand new. These things are only released in the past 12 months. So in comparison, we'll just start with the main features here, which is Eibach has a steel body. Eibach is the one making the springs for most of these coilovers. Coupling that with their in-house shock design, they they are truly the source of both the shock damping characteristics along with the spring rates. So you can't really create a better match than Eibach. These are providing a little bit more of a lift out of the box versus their Fox 2.0 counterparts. For instance, the extended length on both of these identical applications, the Fox or the Eibach is slightly longer. So this is going to give you more lift out of the box, which is why the Fox 2.0 is giving you 0 to 2 inches. And on a lot of Eibach applications, it is 1 to 3 or 2 to 3. So baseline is already starting out at a lift. Same thing though, as far as threaded shock body. These are steel body. So one of the features here is that it would be easier to adjust the height while the coilover is on the vehicle. The Eibach 2.0s also come with a spanner wrench to make the adjustments, while the Fox 2.0 does not. So that makes a big difference for just usability and making the adjustments yourself while the part is on the vehicle. That goes a long way in changing left to right lean or reducing or increasing the rate front to back on your vehicle. The Bilstein 6112 here is in the same ballpark as these 2.0 coilovers. The 6112 doesn't come fully assembled as we have here. We have added a top hat onto the coil springs, compressed it, and basically assembled it as a single unit. These shocks this kit comes with the shocks and the springs separately. So you do need a coil spring compressor to make this base kit happen, but we do an added service of assembly with the new top hats as a single unit like you see here. The biggest upgrade on the 6112s versus the 2.0 coilover options is how much thicker this body is. This is about a 2.6 inch body with a 60 millimeter piston. Now, the 60 millimeter piston is something that Bilstein advertises quite a bit because it is a big deal. A 60 millimeter piston in such a budget-friendly shock is excellent because when you consider a Bilstein kit like this at $750, $700, that's for the pair, versus a Fox 2.0 or Eibach 2.0. The Eibach 2.0 is about $850 for a pair, whereas the Fox 2.0 are $950 a pair. So almost $200 less for the Bilstein on a much thicker shock. So we'll get into the comparisons here in a second after we run through all these features. The Icon 2.5s, these come in normal. They come in normal length, extended length, without reservoir, with reservoir, and with adjustable reservoir. So quite a few options. There are probably 5 different SKUs, types of coilovers for the front of your 4Runner in the Icon front setup. This particular coilover has their adjustment settings, their CDCV compression, damping control settings 1 through 10. The settings make a massive difference on how loose or how tight your 4Runner is going to handle. So if it's just you outing, no family, no gear, you can make a really loose setting is going to give you a lot of body roll, but B, a lot of comfort. And off-road performance, usually you want to run it at a firmer setting. That way, when you're taking the hard hits, aggressive terrain comes up fast. A firmer setting is going to eat up a lot of that energy from the ground to keep your 4Runner kind of in control a lot more. Whereas a softer setting is going to compress too easily and rebound too easily, giving you a very kind of out of control, lot of body roll. In all of that action. So these settings make a tremendous difference when you're going from pavement to the dirt. Regarding the Kings, these are one of the most sought after parts because of how kind of a plush of a ride that they give out of the box. These run a 550-pound spring versus the rest of these are running 600-pound springs. So they're running the same length spring, but about 50 pounds less. So that's generally one of the reasons why they are a lot softer in the daily driver ride zone, easy gravel, kind of easier terrain. These are going to be a lot softer than some of their counterparts. They make up for this, so there's always trade-offs in something being too soft, obviously, or too firm. One of the trade-offs in being soft is without an adjustment mechanism. So these do come with an adjuster. This particular coilover does not have an adjuster on it, but when you're going too soft, then you'll have it'll be pretty comfortable, pretty plush, but you'll also have more body roll. So on a 4Runner that has a lot of weight on it, a lot of top heavy from maybe a rooftop tent, a lot of gear in the back, as opposed to gear in the front. Without an adjuster, your vehicle, you might require specially valved front and rear shocks to kind of account for that specific setup. So when you're too soft, you get too much body roll, too much nosedive, too much squat. They account for this by increasing kind of the valving in the extreme bottom out and the extreme top out actions to prevent that piston from going from topping out, from bottoming out. So that's how they achieve their kind of legendary off-road control through their progressive valving in their shocks. So really soft up front, and it kind of the valving kind of ramps up to keep control in the extreme ranges of motion. The Fox 2.5, one of the big strengths here is their dual speed adjustment, which is controlled by these two knobs. The Fox 2.5s for the 4Runner are running 600-pound spring rates, same length as the King. So these are going to be kind of all around firmer in the normal ride zones. And the benefit to these, though, are the dual speed adjustments. So dual speed adjustment meaning low speed and high speed. Low speed is your gravel, is your everyday pavement, your daily driver kind of activities where the shock and suspension is only moving a little bit. The low speed adjustment really determines how loose or how tight that's going to feel for the vehicle. So if you're running, you could run it really tight to reduce as much body roll as possible, whether that's on for the twisties or if you just like a sportier feel for your 4Runner without a lot of body roll. The low speed compression settings are going to make the biggest difference there. The high speed compression settings, which is controlled by the blue knob, is going to make the biggest difference in off-road terrain to where that shock is doing a lot more work, hitting bigger obstacles, hitting G-outs where your wheel is drooping all the way out, or hitting kind of full compression, high-speed action to where the wheel is getting tucked really hard into the front of the suspension. The high-speed compression settings are going to really determine how much that happens. The key to using those settings effectively is looking at your terrain and seeing how fast you're going to be going or how slow you're going to be going and what kind of response you want. If you're going to be going really fast, we definitely recommend running those settings at pretty firm on both low speed and high speed, so that when you hit that hard obstacles, the shock responds by providing a lot of force against that wheel and tire to prevent full bottom out and full top out. If you run it too loose, then you're basically going to be bouncing off the bump stops and throwing the front end and the rear end of the suspension wherever it ends up wanting to go after nailing those bump stops. You want the shock to slow down the suspension before hitting max compression or max bottom out. The Bilstein 8112s are also one of the newer offerings from Bilstein on top of their 6112. While not as flashy as the 2.5 DSCs or some of the King or Icon options, this shock essentially has two more miniature shocks inside. One called the jounce cutoff and one called the rebound cutoff inside. So on the main shock piston, there's the main 60 millimeter piston with two kind of bump stops on one bump stop on either side. At the jounce cutoff is a miniature piston that makes contact with the main piston and slows it down on top of the shim stacks already in the shock. And that same thing goes for the rebound cutoff as well. So for instance, as the suspension is drooping all the way out, that piston is working through the main body, and then once it hits the full rebound area down here, hits that jounce cutoff to slow it down even further. So essentially it's working as there's essentially two different internal hydraulic bump stops in this main shock body. So they've essentially they've valved very heavily for everyday ride comfort in the middle ride zones, and then addressed the high speed off-road needs with rebound cutoff and jounce cutoff at each extreme ranges of the coilover. Very, very excited to try some of these out on our own vehicles. Haven't had the chance yet, mainly because of stock issues. Thanks, COVID. Last, but certainly not least, is Old Man Emu's BP51 coilover. This is probably one of the most feature-rich coilovers on this table. While it doesn't look so flashy, what you have here on the main shock body is a rebound and compression adjustment. Inside this 2.8-inch shock body is internal bypass as well. So you can actually see here on the aluminum body, you can see kind of like these lines that go up and down the body. That is almost basically to illustrate the point of the internal bypass ports that are present in the main shock body. So the main piston is 51 millimeters, which is BP51. And then there's an outer chamber beyond that main active chamber where the bypass ports lay. So as the piston is going through the main body, oil is bypassing that main piston around and to the other side of the shock body. So the reason for that is to kind of achieve optimal comfort in certain ride zones of the shock. The rebound and compression adjustment allows you to kind of further fine tune how the shock reacts in the end ranges of the main shock body. So just like the Icon, just like the Fox and King, compression settings are going to make the biggest difference on how much of that obstacle that the suspension and shock kind of eats up. Very loose setting, it's going to not eat it up at all, and you're going to most likely bounce off the vehicle's bump stops. Very firm compression settings, the shock is going to eat up a bunch of that energy, slow it down a lot, and then it kind of deflects to the rebound settings, which now determine how fast that wheel comes back out of the suspension. So with all that said, you could dial in the most specifically with these BP51 shocks versus anything else on this table because you have control of rebound. Rebound is arguably one of the biggest factors in ride comfort in my opinion. it's really hard to get right because on all of these coilovers, the spring energy is doing so much of the compression damping work of the shock because it's very difficult to compress the spring. So when that suspension is doing that, the spring is providing a lot of the resistance, and then the shock is as well. But on a rebound action, that spring, all that spring energy that's being compressed is now being let loose along with the wheel and tire and axle of the vehicle. So now the shock has to do all of that damping of the rebound. There's nothing else helping that. So rebound is really a key factor in being able to control comfort and also ride control on the trails or in high speed kind of scenarios. So internal bypass, rebound, and compression adjustment, these I'm slightly biased here because I think these are one of the best shocks I've been on with my own vehicle, and we've been through a lot of them. But now I'll get into some of the comparisons when you're kind of shopping around for a lot of these shocks and kind of how to think about putting them head to head. So a lot of people are putting these two head to head. Eibach, they come with a spanner wrench now. So it comes with its own spanner wrench to make the adjustments for the shock, whereas the Fox 2.0 do not. The Eibach 2.0s are about $100 less expensive than the Fox 2.0s. Whether both of these are probably going to require servicing as well, between 30 and 50,000 miles. That's just the nature of kind of a race product. The Eibach has shown to give more lift out of the box on all the applications that we've seen. So if max lift height is really what you're after in a kind of a budget-friendly coilover package, the Eibach might be the way to go. If you're not too concerned with too much lift and 2 inches is enough to clear your wheel and tire package, and you really want kind of race dependability and heat dissipation, Fox might be your better option because the aluminum body is better resistance against corrosion and better heat dissipation. When you're looking at if bang for buck is really what you're after, then the Bilstein 6112 is probably going to be your better option for something under $1,000. Very rarely are you going to find a 2.5-inch shock for under $1,000, and Bilstein has been able to make that happen. Might not be the softest riding shock out here, but definitely the most consistent. This is kind of a more of a set it and forget it situation. Bilstein is known for getting up to 100,000 miles out of their shocks, and that's really what they build for. They build for longevity, very, very low failure rate, very low warranty rates. So these are retailing for about $100 less than the Eibach, $200 less than the Fox 2.0. And when you're considering you're getting a 2.5-inch shock for cheaper than a 2-inch shock, really run that through. Are you going to be using the race features of these coilovers, or do you really just need a little bit more capability out of your daily driver in a really inexpensive and affordable package that you won't have to worry about servicing like a Fox, Icon, or other kind of race product? Oh, one other thing. These have circlip settings that control the height amount, whereas these are threaded body. Typically on the 2.5-inch shock, you get more height out of a 2-inch shock because the 2.5 shock can dampen that rebound from the spring. Like I was talking about on the BP51s, the rebound is really where a lot of the shock does a bunch of the work, and why you typically don't see 3 inches, 2.5 inch to 3 inches of lift out of a 2-inch shock, because the rebound needed for that action typically exceeds what can be done in a 2-inch shock. Don't quote me on that. That's not universal. We're just talking kind of generalities here. For the 4Runner, big difference in ride comfort and ride handling on all of these, bar none. So All of these, you're going to be getting improved handling, typically improved comfort through better bump compliance, but some are going to ride softer than others. When you get into Icon versus King versus Fox versus the Bilstein 8112s, all of these kind of occupy the same space of race shock for your 4Runner. You really got to wonder, you really got to ask yourself, how much dirt are you going to see with that 4Runner? Are you running long travel? Are you hitting it hard? Do you need to be able to eat up obstacles at 30, 40, 50 miles an hour? Look at your speedometer. Most of the time when we're on trails, we're running it at 10, 20 miles an hour at most. A, because of visibility around the turns, or B, we're looking at the scenery. Passengers don't, as a driver, you're expected, you can see the terrain and react to it, but my wife, all of our passengers, they don't like bumpy rides regardless of how soft we think the shocks or how well they're riding. That's just not the case. So do you really need a race shock? Ask yourself, how much of the dirt are you seeing? How fast are you driving in the dirt? Do you need to be able to eat up big obstacles? If you're unsure, but you still want kind of a race product, adjustments are definitely the way to go, because they will make the biggest difference whether your vehicle is unloaded, loaded with passengers, lots of gear, no gear, how fast you're going. The adjustments really make a difference when there's a wide range of speeds for what you're going to be putting the vehicle through. Something like the Fox 2.5 DSCs, when you're considering a $1,500 pair of coilover, if your budget's between $1,500 and $2,000, the Fox DSCs are hard to beat because of the dual speed compression. You can get a softer spring on the Fox 2.5s, just like the King 2.5s. These come, Icon and Fox come with 600-pound springs out of the box, but you can run a 550 spring like the King does. So it's not a set it, forget it, you get what you want, or you're only stuck with what comes out of the box. You can kind of custom order this stuff to mix and match what your needs are. But as far as these three go, the dual speed compression really make the biggest difference as far as longevity and what kind of ride control or comfort that you need for your rig. The Bilstein 8112s, these are, once again, built for longevity. Because they're so new, we don't actually have good data on how much they're going to need to be rebuilt. Whereas something like the Fox, King, Icon, all three of these manufacturers talk about how you need to rebuild the shocks within 30 to 50,000 miles. A lot of buyers aren't prepared for that, to pay $300 to $400 to rebuild your shocks, ship them there, ship them back, not have your vehicle for easily 2 weeks. Not having your vehicle for 2 weeks, the rebuild cost, definitely have to factor that into the 2 to 3 to 4 year ownership window of having a race product. Whereas something like Bilstein, Eibach, these guys build for longevity more than extreme, like kind of high-end performance. The BP51s, like we said earlier, the features here and the adjustments here make a world of difference in ride control and comfort. Out of my experience so far of running Fox 2.0s, 6112s, Icon 2.5s, Jeff's Fox 2.5s on his Tacoma, and the BP51s, nothing has ridden softer than the BP51s at their softest setting. And you can also make these extremely firm for when your vehicle has 500 pounds, 800 pounds, 4 passengers going to Mammoth, a whole family, camping out for 4 days. You could turn the settings up to adjust for that specifically, or you can turn them up just for a Friday afternoon or Saturday afternoon jaunt through the forest where you're just getting a little squirrely. So a wide range of features here. We hope that we gave enough information for you guys to really make an informed buying decision. If you guys have any questions on your specific rig and your specific needs, definitely don't hesitate to reach out to us, support@shocksurplus.com. I would love to chat with you guys, live chat. Hit us up in the comments, Instagram, we're all over the place. We really hope this has helped you guys make a good decision on what might be the most appropriate for you. No one shock is the best for everybody. Through all the different features, all the different needs, the different budgets, there's really something for everyone, and we hope that we're giving you that information to make that decision yourself, or feel free to reach out to us, and we would definitely love to help. Thanks so much, guys.